Okay, thank you everyone for tuning in. I'm speaking to Coray Seifert from Impeller Studios, writer and executive producer of Starfighter Inc. Hello, Coray.
Hey, how's it going?
Great. Thank you very much for your time. We're 3 hours difference. It's in the evening. We're all ready for bed, at least I am. And hopefully we won't cut into Corey's bedtime with this interview.
It's
So,
fine. We're rocking the time-space continuum here.
okay. Going too fast for light speed, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
All right, so you've had a pretty long career in game design. You've done some sci-fi style games. There's the Shadows of Siren, which is a 2D shoot 'em up. There's the Homeworld Resurrection, which I think a few of us really, really wanted to see, and nothing happened. But you also have games like Lego Brick Breaker or Brick Buster. There's Rocket Bowl. There's Frontlines Fuel of War, and then I noticed this little, oh yeah, GTA 5 and a little.
Just a little bit, just a little bit.
Yeah. So I got to ask, how did you get into being a writer and executive producer for this kind of game? Because you've been working on it for a few years now.
Sure, sure. I mean, it's kind of a funny story. I worked at a studio called Chaos Studios in New York City. We worked on Frontlines and Homefront, and I was a writer and producer, an occasional designer on those. And one of my colleagues gave me a call, said, "Hey, I'm working on a project with David Westman. He was the lead designer on X-Wing," and I'm like, "I'm in. Don't care, whatever it is, I'm in." And I mean, the way I work is I come in and I produce and I write. That's what I am trained to do as a professional. That's what I've done at every stop along my career. The question is just, what's the split? How much writing versus how much production?
Right.
And what's cool about this game is, I think up front it's a lot more production work because we are focusing more on multiplayer. But it's great to also sort of craft the universe because, when you're thinking about, well, what do we call this ship or what's this gun, who manufactured this component, you want a cohesive backstory behind all of that, even if all of it isn't immediately visible. So that's sort of, how I flesh into the team, a lot of production work, a lot of writing work, a little bit of game design, and a lot of wrangling Dave and Jack.
Oh, really? Just rein them in. Just, hey, come here. We need.
Yeah, I think that's what my business card says. Dave Westman Wrangler. So
the lasso gun.
Yeah.
Well, the Kickstarter video was actually really. I guess it was like a bunch of kids just in a room going, "Oh my God, we're doing this! Oh my goodness!" And yours is pretty much, there's words, but your face is like, "Yes, yes."
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's my role. It's like you've got Dave who made X-Wing, you've got Jack who made Crisis and Mech 2 Mercenaries, and I'm just like, not worthy. Not worthy.
Well, it was really great because I got to talk to Jennifer, I think your PR lady, and she literally asked me, "Who do you want to talk to?" And I'm like, I don't know. And then I saw Corey. I was like, you know what? This guy probably is going to be the most level-headed dude whose time I will not, kill. And they're like, "Who are you?" This nobody for an interview. So yeah, it was. I thought getting a writer and talking to about some of the things you guys went through. Like today, how was your day today? How was your workload for the day?
Well, today was a really interesting day. So we, kind of our standard cadence has been, wake up, see what interesting things happened on Kickstarter overnight, see who wrote what, see what new press articles came out. And late last night, someone pledged $10,000 to the campaign, which was like the max you can do. And everybody's like, well, this is great, virtual high fives. And all of our backers were excited because they're like, oh, that's really cool. And then clearly this person did it yesterday and then canceled it today.
Ooh.
To make our curve on Kick Track and all these other things look really terrible. So it was a bummer, but it was also cool because immediately everyone on Kickstarter was like, that's okay, like we'll go tell our friends, like we can do this. Like everyone rallied together, both on the team and in our community, and it was actually a really uplifting thing. So today was a lot of sort of talking about that, talking about how we're going to make the Kickstarter campaign itself really appealing to people, and obviously just sort of taking this sort of insanely large volume of communication and trying to just do one piece at a time.
I noticed the some of the goal or some of the benefits of having those Kickstarter pledge rewards. One of them is that you start out, I think it was like a $16, so just for the game, and then once that was all exhausted, you get a $17. So it's like you really want people just, hey, you know what? Just you want the game, you're going to get it, but you're going to lose $1 if you come back next week. And that's kind of cute because I've never seen that happen on any other Kickstarter. But one of the interesting ones was the $150 entry where you could actually join the team in weekly chats.
Yes.
And say, hey, you know what? I like what you did with this release. I don't like, or I didn't like what you did here. Can we talk about it? That's a very different a way of having an open forum. You're literally having like a Skype conference with everyone.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the big question with that is, what technology we use. So it might be Skype, it might be Hangout. But the cool thing is that it's just a fat pipe of communication between us and our players. And, a lot of the games that I worked on and the team worked on, a lot of the guys on the team worked on Desert Combat, which was a community-driven mod to the max, right? And Frontlines and Homefront, same thing, right? We really aggressively reached out to the community. And so we love working that way. We love talking to our players. We love finding out what people think of ideas before we've worked on them for a year and then get them out there. And so, we thought about, how would we like to do it? And so it's a reward tier that you can go get, but it's also kind of, something we're excited about too.
I noticed that one of the stretch goals was, I think, for 1.5 million. That was for a single-player campaign, and that's sort of something that I'm kind of curious about because the original X-Wing, I barely recall, what the story was about. I do know that the quest system was probably the most interesting because the secondary objectives really made you go, what do I have to do on top of, and you have to go find it, and it was kind of really fun to just in an action adventure sim. So let's say you do get 1.5. What kind of story would you tell in this sort of setting?
Yeah, I mean, it's there's a lot of sort of parallels to the way X-Wing told their story in terms of like delivery. There's probably going to be the same kind of voiceover-driven in combat story, but it's actually that third tier is episodic content that piggybacks on multiplayer. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to give people interesting choices during multiplayer skirmishes. And then based on those choices, we're going to evolve the story. So an example might be, let's say there's this freighter convoy, right? Huge freighter convoy, thousands and thousands of ships. And your mercenary company is given the choice to either raid one of these freighters and blow it up so that your rival corporation can't, profit from what it was hauling, or you can protect them from pirates, right? And it's your choice. Each player can make their own decision, and during the battle, that'll go down, and it'll turn into this really cool, very classic multiplayer experience. But those sort of small decisions that you make in the aggregate will affect the story. And so in this case, let's say, 60%, 70%, 80% of our audience decides, F those freighters, let's take them down. Then the next episode will reflect that. And so what we're going to be doing is sort of writing our story as we sort of march along with our player base. And so it's going to be, I think, a really interesting and, again, really different way to tell a story. We have a traditional single-player campaign in our stretch goals, but it's at a much higher tier just because creating a sort of next-gen, near AAA level single-player campaign is extraordinarily expensive, right? It's a $50 million plus endeavor for the guys who make the Call of Duties and Halos. So what we're trying to do here is take a little bit of story and wrap it around our core multiplayer. And that'll give us something, fun in the moment to moment and something sort of interesting that you want to stick around for and see what happens next with the story.
There are actually quite a lot of space games on the market right now, and some of them coming out. Elite Dangerous came out, I think, a few months back. There's, of course, the looming gargantuan horde of the Star Citizen, whatever that is. One that I'm playing is called Star Conflict. It's this Russian game. It's kind of fun. I'm kind of curious because there's lots of things you can customize in the game that you've outlined. Are there going to be some elements that are unique to this game, but at the same time harken back to X-Wing? Because when I remember my childhood with X-Wing, you can customize your energy level and what you do with this energy, what you do with your shields. You could put it into your engines. That was like really cool.
That was the bomb.
Yeah, that was like, I'm in control right now while I'm fighting. What do? I have to escape. Engines, boom, take off. Put my shields to back and just run like crazy.
Totally.
Yeah, so what kind of innovations as well as traditional things are we having here?
So I think that's actually a really good summation of sort of the in the cockpit customization experience. We want to give people lots of really fine control over their ships, and that's only half of it. The other half is, if you remember the Mech Warrior games, you had crazy detailed control over how you customized your mech. Like you could pick, like, I want that transmission and that drivetrain, and you could build your mech sort of from the inside out. And we want to be able to ideally give players that level of customization. We're still early. We need to see how things go through development. But our goal is to have the most detailed customization and the most detailed control scheme. So it really feels like you're creating an actual, next generation speculative future starfighter driven by hard science, and then piloting it in a really intense combat environment where you're doing exactly the stuff that you're talking about, shifting power, reconfiguring things based on events that are happening in the game. We think it's going to be not only awesome, but different. Because, you made a great point. There are so many good sci-fi games, so many good space shooters coming out. If we're not different, we're dead, right? So we need to make a really unique experience, and we think that's one way we're going to be able to do it.
Well, one thing you're definitely different, if not totally unique, compared to any other game I've seen for space is the hard science fiction angle, and that's appealing to me on a storytelling level. But because of its gameplay, and you're talking about space combat, it means several things. Like, for one, there's going to be no sound in space if you're going hardcore, right? So it's all quiet, except for maybe the engine might hum. Who knows, right? Weapon range. Like, this is a big thing in these kinds of games. If I'm like in my A-wing sort of style fighter and I'm shooting at a Death Star, eventually those shots are going to hit it, right? that's like, what? I can see it, I can shoot it. That's sort of thing. All right. And the other thing is, this is the sort of the Babylon 5 look of these ships. That's one of the first things I thought of. If it's going to be realistic, they're going to be spinning all over the place.
Oh yeah, totally. It's all this kind of stuff. Yeah, totally.
So if I had a three-dimensional joystick, like, I'll totally need that level of control. These are sort of goes through my mind. If you actually have this in mind, how are you going to deal with sound, and how are you going to make that entertaining?
Yeah.
Is there a way to actually do banking rolls, because you are going to be having that yaw, pitch, and axis sort of spins to actually make it feel like you're banking left and right? And can I actually shoot a Star Destroyer from far away and have it eventually hit?
Sure. So sound and music is going to be really interesting. We'll have cinematic music because it's awesome. But for sound, what we're trying to think about is, what would you actually hear in that circumstance, right? And there's two things you're going to hear. You're going to hear the cockpit and sort of all your gear rattling as events in the game happen. So in a traditional game, if a big explosion happens right off of your ship, you're going to hear, like, you'll hear gases expanding and air burning and fuel burning, right? You're not really going to hear that. What you're going to hear is the impact on the frame of your ship and all of the sort of subsequent sympathetic vibrations that come with it. So that thing will go off, and instead of that sound that you're gonna hear this different sound, like poof, and then, like, rattling and all this different stuff. And what's cool about that is it's going to be super immersive because it's different, right? It's not what you expect. It's not the big Hollywood explosion that you'd expect. It's something new and unique. We think that's going to sort of deep down create this really cool experience for players. And the other thing is, you'll hear your situational awareness system. And if you think about it, this is already what's happening with modern day fighters, and this is only going to be, evolved once you get into, actual real world interstellar combat or space combat. And that's going to actually be customized by the pilot, right? The pilot's going to very finely tune what they want to hear, how they want that sound represented. And luckily for us, we're making a video game, so that actually works really well. So, for example, let's say my personal preference is, anytime there's a ship behind me, I want to hear some engine noise, right? So my situational awareness system will say, okay, there's a ship, it's about that far back, and it'll play me the right sound effect to make me feel like there's a ship behind me. Like something like the classic TIE fighter engine, right? Right? But if you want it to be more informational, you can set it that way. So when that same ship is back there, you can have your situational awareness system say, enemy fighter 15 meters, 6 o'clock, right? Both are viable options. Both are options that we want to support, and we really do want to also support sort of custom voiceover packs, so you can really customize the feel of your ship. So the way you trick out your ship with things that you hear is going to be a totally different audio experience than what I hear.
Will I be able to, let's say, add my own voice or own series of sets of sounds to be the in-flight guy saying, "Warning, warning, 6 o'clock, turn around"?
Out of the box, no, but we actually have a tier for that. I believe that's the Jarvis package, where you get to work with me and we get to together write our
Excuse me, sir,
own
you have
VO
no
set.
engines. Please turn around.
Exactly. So that's sound and music, and we're going to post a little bit on our Kickstarter page, a little bit in more detail soon. Let's see, what was the second one? It was Control in Space.
Right. How are you going to deal with the three-dimensionals?
So it's one of those things where a lot of games have actually represented it very well, just in different contexts. So if you think about like in Battlefield when you fly a helicopter, right, it's actually kind of similar controls, right? You're using every axis. It's just that the helicopter keeps you roughly suspended and the gravity pulls you down, so you're not sort of sliding through space. So the way I like to think about it is it's like flying a helicopter that can go really fast. So like you very rarely just sort of point and like jam on the accelerator. It's more like the movie Gravity, where it's like you have these fine adjustments. Your maneuvering thrusters are firing off really fast, and then when you get where you want to go, you give a nice burst and you start moving in that direction. So it's a totally different feeling and a totally different experience to fly. And at first it's tough. It is, right? And especially right now, we only have sort of our early prototype. We only have one ship. We don't have like the beginner level ship that kind of eases you into learning. But the cool thing is, after you've played for a little bit and after you've kind of gotten over the fly really fast and zoop, you're off the map, which everybody does the first couple times because they're like, all right, I want to go shoot that guy, jam on the accelerator, woof, and you're gone. Once you get through that, you start to really hone in on how to sort of very gently control these ships. And once you get good at it, you can do sick stuff. I mean, Jack, he's our creative director, Jack Mamias. He's probably the best, and I think Dave might take umbrage to this. Jack is the best about at just sort of like tumbling through space and somehow always having his guns pointed at you, which is really frustrating. But it's a skill thing, man. Like that's the game we're going for. That's the hardcore niche we're going for. It's not a game where you can jump in and be competitive with the best players the first second you're playing, right? It's just not that game, right? It's a game where if you want to be really good, you play a lot, you learn the controls, you can fly them right away, right? You can go in and you can do your thing. But to get really good, you got to put the time in and explore the different systems, and it's definitely a skill-based game. And the last one, so the combat distance is a really interesting one. And I hesitate to give you the full answer just because I would say Jack or Dave would be the ones to do that sort of the best justice. But I'll leave you with one thought, which is that just as weapons are going to keep evolving, and the sort of nature of space combat is a different paradigm than terrestrial combat, countermeasures are going to continue to adapt as well, right? So let's say I've got my ship far, far away from your ship. I fire off a weapon, laser or this or that, because there's so much distance in between us. As fast as that weapon will go and as far as that weapon will go, you're giving me so much more time to prepare my countermeasure. So that's why in our future, assessment, the only weapons that are viable are ones that are fired so close that you can't get a countermeasure reliably off. And that's when you have really interesting close-in dogfights, right? And that's what we think is going to be A, extremely fun, B, backed by hard science, and C, really different.
I was immediately thinking of the Mass Effect universe. They have the kinetic barriers that can stop physical objects, but they call it knife fighting, laser. Like everyone has lasers, and they all just melt your hull, but you never actually see it because it wasn't a fighting in space sort of game. But it's like, okay, so hey, if you got that going and you already thought that far ahead, that answers my question. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say one of the cool things is if you look at the some of the articles that have been out there, the Ars Technica and the Escapist articles, are David Westman, Jack, and our sort of science and technology consultant Zach do a great job of breaking that stuff down. I mean, I'm giving you sort of the surface level, producer version. But if you want the real deal science version, those are the guys to talk to.
Okay, well, the other big thing about hard science is gravity. And if you're having this realistic object that's spinning through space and whatnot, how is it going to be affected by gravity? Are we going to be like coming near like a comet? It's going to be pulling us closer to it. Is there going to be like a giant meteor and you're going to be zipping through it? It's going to be pulling you in every which direction. Are we going to be having these really crazy levels where you're going to be fighting in a cavern, a space cavern, and you're just going through these places and your ship will just start naturally being pulled? Is this the sort of idea you want to have?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, there's it's not even just gravity; it's also atmosphere, right? We've prototyped. We actually played around with the comet idea, right? Where it's a comet moving through space, and there's a mining facility that's pulling minerals out of it, and you sort of have combat around that, and it does change the fundamental physics of it. But what's cool is that it's more straightforward than you might imagine. Like, it sounds really complex because like comet is moving in this direction, and we're moving, and then we're going to go that way.
Right.
It actually just somehow works itself out pretty nicely. And I think that's also part of having just a really sound physics engine underneath the game. But the other cool thing we're doing is, one of our very early prototypes was a freighter that was in a decaying orbit around a planet. And as the mission goes on, it's a multiplayer mission, right? As the mission goes on, one group is trying to destroy it. One group is trying to help protect drones that are evacuating cargo off of the freighter. And as the mission progresses, the gravity is pulling you towards the planet, and so you're starting to get into the atmosphere. So we started, I think it was increasing the like air viscosity and like slowing everything down.
Okay.
So the feeling at the beginning of the mission was wildly different from at the end. And these are just prototypes, right? We may or may not ship with any one of these specifically, but the cool thing is you can imagine all the cool, wild stuff that you can do. And when you take into account we're going to have tiny recon fighters that can go as fast as they want, and as big as massive assault transports that have dozens of space marines on them, or what do you want to call them? Troops on them. I don't want to dive into cliches. That are just massive in comparison. That adds another dimension that we can play with and do interesting things with.
Now, you mentioned the atmosphere, and I've seen the video where this fighter comes out and its foils come out. And I'm thinking, wait a second, what do they need foils for in space? You watch Star Trek Voyager, and those things come up, and you're like, why is it doing that? But if you mention atmosphere, I'm assuming there's some aerodynamics in here. There's going to be some aspects involved with how light and how heavy and how sleek your ship is if it's going into like a high Earth orbit or a low Earth orbit.
So we actually haven't. We don't have any of our terrestrial fighters. That's something we want to explore, but we don't have any of those guys yet, right? Everything that we're showing is our, in orbit or further ships.
Right.
Mostly they're made for deep space. And the ship that you're talking about is the Shrike Information Warfare Craft. And the purpose of that ship is, it's fast, it's lightly armed, but it's largely meant for information warfare, gathering information, disrupting information. And those wings, the thing that looks like wings, they're actually sensor arms that give it a much broader range, and they fold in just because it's in a hangar, right? So if you can imagine storing 20 of those with the wings out,
okay,
that wouldn't work very well. It's actually hard to see in the video, but you can see there's all these other Shrikes docked around the bay. You sort of fire through them, which is sort of, a lot of sort of hard science projections show that as like the most common way to launch ships, right? You just sort of have your ships tucked in, and you fire them off almost like a machine gun shooting ships. And so that's why you open your sensors up when you get out there. And the interesting thing is, it's a total risk reward. It was like the S-foils in X-Wing, right? When you have your sensors open, you have greater penetration against targets of information warfare attacks. But when you close them, you're a much smaller target. Like it makes a huge difference in combat, because we are talking about accurate weapons, but not sort of dumb fire weapons for the most part. So having that small profile is incredibly important in combat.
Interesting. I can't. I wish I could see more. I wish I had more questions for you, but I think I've taken up enough of your time. I'll see how the project's doing in the next few weeks, and I wish you all the best. And I'll be sure to tell as many people as I can about it because I'm just almost as excited as you guys are. That video, you guys are like,
yeah, we're pumped.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, everyone. That was Coray Seifert from Impeller Studios, writer and executive producer of Starfighter Inc.
Thanks.